If you're serious about writing professional, scalable Angular apps, there's one core concept you absolutely have to master. Honestly, it's the secret weapon that separates clean, beautiful code from a total maintenance nightmare. And yeah, we're talking about services and dependency injection. So, let's break it all down.
Okay, let's start with a scenario I am 100% sure we've all been in. You write this fantastic piece of logic. Maybe it's to handle a user subscription or something. And it works great. But then, you need that same exact logic in the header, and oh wait, also in the sidebar, and now in this other component over here. So what do? Come on, be honest. You copy and paste it, right? And that copy-paste reflex, well, it leads directly to this situation right here. Before you know it, you've got the same chunk of subscription logic scattered all over your app. Component A has a copy, component B has its own copy, component C has another. Each one is in its own little world, completely unaware that the others even exist. And look, it might seem harmless at first, but trust me, it's a ticking time bomb. So what's the actual damage here? Well, first off, you're breaking one of the golden rules of programming. Don't repeat yourself, the dry principle. But it gets so much worse. You're mushing together your core business logic, the what your app is supposed to do, with your UI logic, the how it looks. Just imagine you need to update that subscription feature. Now you have to go on a scavenger hunt, tracking down every single copy and just praying you don't miss one. That, my friends, is a recipe for disaster, bugs, and a whole lot of headaches.
So how do we clean up this mess? Thankfully, Angular gives us this beautifully elegant solution, and it's called a service. The best way to think about a service is as the central brain for a specific task in your application.
When you boil it down, a service is really just a plain old TypeScript class. Nothing magical about it. It has one focused job. Maybe it's fetching user data, maybe it's making an API call, but the key, the most important part, is that it is completely separate from the UI. A service doesn't care what your buttons look like or what color your header is, it just handles the logic.
And because of that separation, a service is built from the ground up for reusability. You write that complex logic one time inside the service, and then any component anywhere in your entire application can tap into it. It becomes the single authoritative source of truth.
And here is what that looks like in practice. Just look at that. The duplicated logic gets pulled right out of those components and is centralized into one subscribe service. And now, every component just points to this one service. We've gone from a scattered mess of copies to a single, clean source of truth. It's so much more efficient, and believe me, it is a lifesaver when it comes to maintenance. Okay, this is awesome, right? We've centralized all our messy logic into a nice, clean service. But this brings up a pretty important new question. If the logic lives over there in the service, how in the world do our components actually get access to it? Right? This is the next critical piece of the puzzle. We've built this powerful, centralized service, but it's totally useless if our components can't talk to it. So how do we build that bridge? How do we make that connection?
Now, our first instinct as programmers might be to just do it ourselves, right? Just go into the component and type new my services. But that is a trap, a huge trap. When you do that, you are tightly coupling that component to that specific service class. And even worse, you're creating a brand new, separate instance of the service for each component. We're right back where we started with multiple copies. The Angular way is totally different. Instead of creating the service ourselves, we simply ask Angular to provide it for us.
And that simple act of asking has a name. It's called dependency injection, or DI. It's this really powerful design pattern where a class, like our component, doesn't build its own dependencies. It just declares what it needs. It says, hey, I need a subscription service, and some external system, in our case, Angular's injector, provides it. The component has no idea how the service was made or where it came from. It just trusts Angular to hand over the correct one.
So, let's get practical. How does this all actually work in modern Angular? Well, the great news is the whole process has been simplified down to a super easy two-step process.
It really just boils down to this. Step 1, you create your service and you tell Angular about it. Step 2, you just ask for it wherever you need it, in a component or even in another service. Let's take a quick look at each step.
So step 1 is all about this little piece of code right here, the @injectable decorator with provided in equals root. When you add this to the top of your service class, you're basically saying, hey, Angular, I want you to manage this service for me, and I want you to make it available at the root level of the entire application.
And why is provided in root the way to go? Well, there are 3 awesome reasons. First, it automatically creates a singleton. That means one single shared instance for your entire app. Second, it gives you app-wide access without any complicated setup. And third, it's tree-shakeable. That's a fancy term for a really cool optimization. It means if no part of your app ever actually uses this service, Angular is smart enough to just remove it from the final code, making your app smaller and faster. It's a win-win-win.
Then we get to step 2, which is somehow even easier. Inside your component, all you have to do is call the inject function and pass it the name of the service class you want. That is it. Angular's dependency injector does all the heavy lifting, finds that single root-level instance we created, and hands it right to your component. No new keyword, no manual wiring, just one simple, clean function call.
Okay, so why do we go through all of this? What's the big payoff at the end of the day? Well, it's simple. This architecture is what lets you build truly professional, robust, and scalable applications.
The benefits here are massive. You get true reusability, you get a beautiful separation of concerns, your components worry about the view, your services worry about the logic. This makes your code so much easier to test and to maintain. Think about it. When the subscription rules change, you just go edit one single file. And as your app grows from 10 components to 100 or even 1,000, this structure is what's going to keep it all sane and scalable.
It all boils down to this simple, powerful idea. Let your components manage what the user sees, and let your services manage how the application actually works. Once you embrace this pattern, you're not just writing code that works for today, you're building a solid foundation that's clean, robust, and ready for whatever you dream up next. So, what will you build now?